February 28th, 2023. Let the record show the meeting started at 5:54 p.m. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Chatham Select Board meeting on February 28th, 2023. Let the record show that the meeting started at 5:34 p.m. Where did February go? And I'll read what I'm supposed to read. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 16th, 2022 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31st, 2023, this meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 203-386-491#, or join this meeting online via Microsoft Teams with the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. First order of business this evening is to poll the Select Board for a quorum. Mr. Nicastro? Present. Ms. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Schell?
Present.
Mr. Metters?
Present.
And Mr. Dykens is present as well. Next item are public announcements and agenda item requests. I do believe we have Gloria McPherson will announce the community housing survey. Gloria, are you on? I'll recognize you, please.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Hi everyone, good evening. I just wanted to remind everyone that the online community housing survey is still open. The town is seeking input from the community on the future development of affordable and attainable housing on 2 town-owned properties, Main Street in West Chatham, the former Buckley property, and Meeting House Road in South Chatham, the former Fall River Diocese property. If you haven't taken the survey yet, please take a few minutes to share your vision for those 2 properties. The survey should take under 10 minutes. It's not a heavy lift. It's actually pretty interesting, some of the imagery on there that you get to comment on. This particular survey follows a community outreach forum on February 15th, where our consultant team presented several sketch plans of possible development scenarios for each of the properties with a range of options for housing type, density, and site layout. This survey is an opportunity to provide direct feedback on each of those conceptual plans. There are also questions relating to different architectural styles, building forms, and housing types. The survey information, along with feedback from the outreach forum on February 15th, will be used by the consultants to revise and refine the conceptual plans, which will then be presented at another community engagement forum at the end of March, date to be determined. The survey is available now through Sunday, March 12th. You can access the survey on the website shown on the screen, or you can access it through the housing page on the town's website. You can also access the consultant's February 15th presentation on the housing webpage. And if I have another minute or so left in my time, I'd like to share a few survey stats. So the survey's been out for about a week, and as of this afternoon, we've received 596 responses to the survey. Wow, that's huge. So obviously people care a lot about housing and the development of these 2 properties. So of the 596 responses to the survey, 472 are Chatham residents, either year-round or part-time, and 122 don't live in Chatham. Of those who don't live in Chatham, 52 work in Chatham, and 26 are from parents whose children attend school in Chatham. Don't be left out. Go on and complete the survey if you haven't done so yet, and we'll look forward to the results of the survey and the February 15th forum in future design options. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Gloria. Those numbers are pretty impressive. 596, 496. That's pretty neat. And Jill.
Oh, 596.
Oh, I'm sorry, 596. Okay, Jill Goldsmith.
Yeah, and along the same lines, if anyone needs accommodation or assistance with the survey, please also call Gloria. Her contact information is on the slide, and the phone number is 945-5168. So if anyone needs any assistance or an accommodation with filling out the survey, just let Gloria know. Thanks.
Okay, and still on announcements here. Any announcements from the Select Board? I see none. I see Kim Burson. Do you have an announcement, Kim? You're online with your hand up?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Kim.
Okay, great. This is an agenda item request.
Okay.
But it is reiterating one that Chief Anderson had actually submitted to you at your January 31st meeting. And this is to rewrite the film permit process. And I reiterate his comments that rewriting this permit is important to have good oversight, protection of abutters' rights, and the need to communicate with everyone who may be affected by a crew filming in town are all good reasons to re-permit or to improve the permitting process in place. And I will just give you my personal reason for this. As many of you already know, the Eastwood Point property, which is a private neighborhood of 42 owners, is currently being told about a Netflix movie. We were not informed until an email last Friday on February 24th, and then had a first presentation last evening by the homeowner. And yet this morning, 3 moving trucks pulled into the property to start the production process. This is going to be a 4-month movie. And in speaking with the producer, he has already informed us there will be paparazzi from New York because Nicole Kidman is one of the stars. And she is only one of the stars. There are many stars. He has already been very obvious to many neighbors, suggesting that they rent their property in order to help them in accommodating all of the space and equipment that they need. I just reiterate Chief Anderson's plea to really pay attention and give some good focus to the permitting of filming in Chatham. I love the idea that Chatham is such a draw for these movies, but the neighbors should know well before moving trucks move in and well before a producer tells us to prepare ourselves for paparazzi and a constant stream of interruptions and blocking of traffic. We have very narrow roads in Eastwood Point, and it's concerning to a lot of the neighbors. So I know that in the Chronicle notes about your comments on January 31st, you said you would address this. It's a little late for those of us in the neighborhood who are going to have to suffer through July 4th weekend with this. But I ask you to please put it on agenda very soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kim. I heard you loud and clear, and we can thank Select Board Member Davis for bringing it to our attention, and we will certainly circle back with the chief and get it on the agenda as soon as possible. Jill and I will set it as soon as it's practical. Okay, Kim? Thank you. Any other public announcements and/or agenda item requests from either folks here? I see Mr. Schell's hand is up. Mr. Schell.
Yeah, I think everybody knows, if they read the Chronicle, there's a petition article relating to the obstruction removal process out at the airport that affects, roughly speaking, 21 homeowners out there. I want to ask if we could have reserved an opportunity to discuss an amendment to our bylaw, Chapter 103B, next week, if we possibly could. Which would, as I'm thinking about it now, I need to think about it a little bit more, but the concept is to sort of harmonize Chapter 100 with the proposed petition, not proposed, the petition article, which will be on the warrant by law.
Right. Okay, Mr. Schell, thank you. So, Jill, so noted. Okay, any other agenda item requests and/or anybody online with their hand up? I see no one here. Anybody else? Okay. So we'll go on to our public comments on our business agenda. We do have a lengthy business agenda this evening, kind of wide-ranging, if you will, focused mostly on the budget. But first, we are considering an interim appointment to the Monomoy Regional School Committee. We just interviewed Scotty Finnegan. And then we have a very important transmittal of our operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2024, including water operating budget. And then we're going to review annual town meeting articles. We have articles with respect to the declaration of surplus property of 193 Stony Hill Road. We have water capital articles. We have an inflation protection article, which is kind of new to us. We have other potential capital articles, important ones, I believe, treatment plant, wells 5 and 8, transfer station improvements, belt filter press considerations at our wastewater treatment plant, Eldridge Public Library, HVAC, and a sand salt storage shed, and then the select board is off to an executive session. So we have a very busy agenda this evening. Are there any public comments on that busy agenda that folks would like to comment upon from the public? Okay, I see no hands up, so we'll move right on to our business agenda this evening. The first one, again, is to consider the appointment, interim appointment, I should say, to the Monomoy Regional School Committee of a Chatham representative. We had resignation by Danielle Tolley, who we'll miss, but we have Scotty Finnegan here, who came in this evening to interview for that interim appointment. And I will call the members of the Chatham members of the Monomoy Regional School Committee to the table here. Jackie, say aye. Aye. Betty, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Jesse, say aye.
Aye.
So we have 3 members of the Monomoy Regional School District, Chatham representatives to the Monomoy Regional School District Committee here. And, I'm going to open it up to a nomination right off the bat here. Mr. Nicastro's hand is up first.
Mr. Chairman, I move to appoint Joanne Scotty Finnegan to the Monomoy Regional School Committee until the date of the next annual town election, scheduled for May 11th, 2023.
Second.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there any further discussion of Ms. Finnegan's candidacy for this appointment, the interim appointment? Okay, I'm going to start down at the end. Jessica, I don't mean to point Jesse.
Aye.
Aye, yep. Mr. Nicastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And Betty?
Aye.
And Jackie?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well, and that vote is unanimous. So, Scotty, welcome to the Regional School Committee, and have fun. Thank you, folks. Thanks for being here this evening.
Thank you, Select.
Appreciate your interest. Okay, we're on to a kind of roll up your sleeves moment here. First item of business is our fiscal year 2024 budget review and a potential vote. We've got both Jill Goldsmith and Alex Halila to review updates. So there are a few updates, but again, a good package that was sent to us, and much appreciated. So, is it Alex or Jill to start? Who would like to start?
I'll do just a quick introduction
Thank you, Jill.
for Alex. So, as you know, the Select Board received the original budget transmittal and discussed it at your meeting on January 18th. Since then, Alex has been working with the department heads on fine-tuning also some of our assumptions for revenues and other costs associated that are outside of our control have come in. And so we're at a point now that Alex is ready to present the final budget to the Select Board. And that budget is a 7.63% increase over the fiscal year 2023 budget. We're currently in fiscal year 23. And she'll also present the capital budget as well. That is just above $3.674 million, or 9% of the operating budget. So if the board doesn't mind, I'll turn this over to Alex and she can get into the details. Thank you.
Off to you, Alex. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as Jill said, we are presenting the operating budget for FY 2024, along with the water operating, but I'll get into that after we present the general fund operating budget. So it's presented right now at $37,791,665. And that's just slightly above where we were on January 17th when we presented it. As you are aware, some items were added into the budget for staffing, particularly we added in one position that we had not projected at when we first presented the budget. Those are listed on page 3 of the agenda report. So the total of the staffing requests for FY 2024, which is one of the major drivers in the increase is $620,355. Other than that, we have listed where some of the increases are. You'll notice that insurance has gone up quite a bit over FY 2023, a 22% increase. And some of the items that we mentioned when we first presented the budget, mostly contractual obligations, as well as some of the utility costs due to inflation. We did get the health insurance, which we did adjust downward. However, with some of the new FTEs being presented, we do have a placeholder for those within the FY 2024 budget. And I'm just looking through the memo. If there's any particular items that you would like to discuss tonight, what we're asking you to do is to vote on the budget and send it over to the Finance Committee for their final review. And they will be meeting every Tuesday and Thursday moving forward to make their recommendations back to the board prior to the warrant closing. So with that, I will pause if you have any questions on the operating budget.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I just have one quickie to start. Have we heard from the schools at all in terms of where their numbers are?
Yes, we have heard from the schools. However, they're not voting until, I believe, March 9th. So the Monomoy Regional School District went down by about $6,000, and Cape Tech went up slightly, and that's based on the governor's House 1 budget, which was just released. So they've plugged those numbers in. So not a big change in either of those budgets.
Okay, that's the right answer, I guess. That's what I was looking for. I have one stupid nit on page 5 of our report. It's a stupid nit, but we want to catch it. On the article itself, the town operating budget is 37, and in the verbiage it says 35. So I just want to make sure those line up. Those are coherent.
3779.1. Oh, up on top, yes.
Yeah, just
We will
line
change
one.
that. Yep.
Again,
Yep.
a nit, it's just a line one. And then we'll fill in the draft motion when we know, where the sources of revenues are from. The only other overarching comment I'm going to make, and then I'll turf it off to my colleagues, is at some point, I really would like to have a free cash schedule for where we are today, if you will, and what our plan is. Just lay it out really clearly, where we plan to spend for this budget and where we think we're going to end up, after if everything's approved, if you will. Just, I know you've verbalized, and perhaps it's in my budget book, which I actually didn't bring tonight, but anyway, I would love to see that. And then you've done in the past really cool debt schedules that highlights, and maybe in color, if you will, the various pieces of debt and what they relate to, and then how it drops off over time. You've done it in the past. I don't mean to burden you, but just I think that would be really cool to have at some point as well. So with that, I'm going to shut up or be quiet, and I'll turf it off to my colleagues here. Mr. Nicastro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex, I just have a question, and it relates to consistent concern expressed by the Finance Committee about the level of free cash. But what happens to free cash if we don't spend it? It just sits there, right? It's already been taxed. It isn't a new tax on the property owners.
Yeah, that's correct. Free cash is money that it's made up of really 3 sources. The first is local estimated receipts that come in excess of what we have estimated. So our actual receipts in excess of estimates. As you know, during the pandemic, we really reduced the estimates, not knowing what were going to happen with the pandemic. So that's one of the reasons why free cash is so high. Also, it's made up of those items that are one-time items, such as the Harwich IMA funds, that, the $2.265 million, which we've been carrying in free cash since 2018. We do have a warrant article this year to segregate that money for wastewater capital expenses. So we're hoping to move that out of free cash into that reserve fund. The second source of free cash is budget turnbacks. And consistently, the town has had about less than 2% of the operating budget as turnbacks. We did have an anomaly one year, which was higher. And again, that was, I think, due to the pandemic. And then we had some vacant positions, and during which we couldn't hire anyone. So those are the reasons. And then the free cash that's carried forward from year to year. So really the 3 components. Free cash is not used to fund any of the operating budget. That is our financial policies don't allow us to do that, and that's actually the best practices by the Department of Revenue. I have updated what the use of free cash is estimated to be. So right now we're looking at a balance, if everything moves forward as projected, of just under 309,000 to carry forward to next year.
So the only way you really lessen the amount in free cash is to lessen your estimates of receipts.
To increase my estimates of receipts,
All
which
right, I'm
we've
sorry.
actually,
All right,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I had it backwards.
Yeah, and we've done that. Now that we have a couple years of the short-term rental tax under our belts, we know what's going to happen. We can, look at the trends. We've increased. We've been very robust with our estimates for this FY 2024 budget. And as the town manager and I have mentioned in the budget message, is the operating budget as presented will have no impact on the tax levy moving forward. We have several articles, capital articles, that if they are to be funded by the tax levy will have an impact, but that's up to the voters to decide.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Alex and/or Jill on the operating budgets? I imagine we're going to have quite a bit of conversation on the capital budget, or those capital items, if you will. Mr. Shell.
Just, well, two questions. I'll start with the easy one. I believe with respect to cash flow, there's an anticipation that you will get a refund or a rebate, whatever you want to call it, when the private funding comes through for the Eldridge Garage project. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So once that project is completed and we do get that refund, that will again be deposited in the general fund. It will close to free cash, to replenish free cash to be used again once it's certified as voted by the taxpayers at town meeting.
And that's in the neighborhood of 1.7?
I believe
Guessing.
it was 1.46.
Oh, 1.4, okay, sorry, yeah, okay. The other question I have, I don't know, I don't think you ever really had a chance to address it. There was a line in the Finance Committee commentary, if you will, the memo regarding the addition of the, whatever it is, 8.5 or 7.5 FTEs. And the question they raised was whether the level of those people that are on the list to be added were completely, fully addressed the needs that were articulated in support of the additions. Do you want to comment on that at all?
I'm not sure if the town manager might be better suited to answer this, but we've reviewed all the staffing needs. Every year we go through this with the department heads. And as we've articulated, beginning back with the FY 2021 budget, staff had identified, I believe, 15 positions that were needed to fulfill the services, same level of services that we've been providing. Pandemic hit, so we stalled on that. We did add positions last year, but again, reviewing the positions this year, staff is needed to accomplish all of the select board's goals.
Jill?
Yes, and I would add to that, this is for sustaining core services. I think the Finance Committee's report had mentioned about carrying out projects, and certainly there is a need for administrative staff, but also we're looking for 2 clinical social workers and for those type of community services type of positions to help address the needs and services for the entire community. So we did have a conversation, Alex and I did, yesterday with the FinCom chair. We discussed free cash and we discussed a little bit more about the needs for staffing and what our perspective is. And so the listing is in the report. There's the positions that are recommended are listed as under the update. I do have to say that there's one position in natural resources under the Harbor Masters Division. That is the boat operator and marine mechanic that at this time I'm not recommending for funding. There's some other policy decisions that we have to work through, but I would be more comfortable of holding that until next fiscal year for a recommendation. Otherwise, the positions that I have listed that we had presented back in January are pretty much the same with the addition of the person to do the short-term rental regulation administration.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Any other questions on the operating budget? The capital budget, the 3.674 million is also part of this conversation. Any comments or thoughts on the 3.674? I anticipate some further discussion on the single capital items, if you will, that are in excess of 250,000. But any comments on the capital, the 3.674, which is 9% of the operating budget? Okay, well, I think I'll entertain a motion to transmit the operating and capital budget to the Finance Committee. Mr. Castro has his hand up.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't know whether Alex had any
Any-
comment on the capital.
On the
but,
capital.
She had stopped at the, I'm prepared to offer a
Yeah.
motion, but.
Yep.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to point out that the capital budget is the same amount as was presented in January. As the town manager mentioned, it is 9% of the operating budget and within our financial policies. And again, no use of the tax levy. This is all from available funds, primarily free cash, and then the Waterways the Waterways Improvement Fund, the PEG Cable Access Fund, Cemetery Perpetual Care, and then 2 old articles that will be repurposed for FY 2024.
I like the way you pull out those old articles, by the way, Alex. That's great. Now, and the other point I want to make is, the requests are $15.3 million, and it's boiled down to 3.6. So I'd say they've done a pretty good job of boiling it down, and I think we're investing wisely.
Mr. Chairman, there are several motions. I'm happy
Yes, there
to
are,
offer
yeah.
them all in succession. So first, I move that we transmit the proposed FY 2024 operating and capital budgets to the Finance Committee per the Town of Chatham General Bylaw on or before March 1, 2023.
Second.
Okay, we'll vote on that one. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we place the FY 2024 operating budget in the amount of $37,791,665 on the warrant for the annual town meeting 2023.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we place the FY 2024 capital budget article for $3,674,000 on the town meeting warrant for annual town meeting 2023.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend to town meeting the FY 2024 operating budget in the amount of $37,791,665 and the capital budget in the amount of $3,674,000.
Second.
Okay, a vote. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We made the date, March 1st. Okay. Now, our next item on the agenda is 2023 Annual Town Meeting Articles Review. We have some very interesting articles here. The first is declaration to surplus of town property at 193 Stony Hill Road for affordable attainable housing, contingent on the annual town meeting debt exclusion affirmative votes for 1610 Main Street, and then a potential placement and recommendation on the article for the warrant 2023. And to present, we have Katie Donovan. Katie.
Mr. Chair, we just had one more order of business for the FY '24 budget. That's the water operating
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
budget.
Yep. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, go ahead, Alex. Yep, sorry.
Okay, yes. Again, per the Chatham bylaws, you have to transmit the water operating budget to the Finance Committee on or
Yes.
before March 1st.
Yep.
The water operating budget is presented at $3,913,572, and that's an increase of just under 1.5% or 1.47% from the FY 2023 operating budget. The water operating budget is funded through water rates, primarily with $400,000 coming from the tax levy. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on this.
Questions for Alex? Hearing and seeing none. Mr. Nacastro.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we place the FY 2024 Water Department operating budget at $3,913,572 on the town meeting warrant for our annual town meeting 2023.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend the FY 2024 Water Department operating budget at $3,913,572 to the annual town meeting 2023.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we transmit the proposed FY 2024 water operating budget to the Finance Committee per the Town of Chatham General Bylaw on or before March 1, 2023.
Second.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Okay, we'll liven up the movie camera again, and here comes Katie. Next item on our agenda is annual town meeting article review, potential placement and votes. We have first is the declaration of surplus of town property, 193 Stony Hill Road, for affordable attainable housing, certainly contingent on the annual town meeting and debt exclusion, affirmative vote for 1610 Main Street, and a potential placement recommendation on that article to the 2023 annual town meeting. This is an agenda item request by Mr. Shell, and I'll certainly offer him the opportunity to speak to it. And then, Katie, you can chime in as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr.
welcome.
Chairman. In simple terms, the concept here is that the town meeting have the opportunity to, in essence, approve the construction of a new center for active living at 1610 Main Street, and at the same time, by reason thereof, create the opportunity to also vote, but as a kind of a companion article, to convert the current location, 193 Stony Hill, into affordable housing. And this is a two-for-one.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Katie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. So as Mr. Shell had mentioned, he had requested this article, so staff, myself and town council worked to prepare an article along with comments from Select Board Member Shell. We've provided that to you for consideration this evening. There would be one minor change to the article, and that would also just to make sure that we reference that the Council on Aging / Senior Center is actually now referred to as the Center for Active Living. And we had provided a revised motion for the board's consideration earlier today. So if the board would like, I can try to share that on my screen, or if you have that available, I can just take any comments. Okay. Okay, so this would be the revised motion that we are proposing for tonight's article.
Same language we have in our package.
Yes, with the,
With the,
like,
yeah,
right,
the substitution, the
that's correct.
Council on Aging would scratch out. Okay.
If I could just add, I just want
Yes,
to
please.
add that the idea here is that we are attempting to address the needs of really two important constituencies. Obviously, our seniors, but also younger working folks in Chatham, whether they work here or they live here or they have kids here. The objective is to address the needs of that community as well, which are clearly housing that they can afford to live in.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Ms. Davis, and then Mr. Castro, and then Mr. Metters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we all know, we've been very aggressive about housing in Chatham. But if you take a big, broad step back, you see how slow the process is. And to place this article in the way that it has, and for Selectman Shell to have brought this up, it's progressive and it's time-saving. And we can move forward, contingent, obviously, on a positive vote for 1610, which I'm sure will happen. But I think that this is a real time-saving scenario that we should accept and recommend.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Nacastro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have historically, and I've said it publicly, consistently felt that if the, what was then called the Council on Aging and now is the Center for, Chatham Center for Active Living, were not to be located where it is now, that property at 193 Stony Hill Road would be suitable for housing. That would be a good use for it, so I think this article would accomplish it. I just have one question of either Mike or Katie. It says the disposition would be for affordable / attainable. Does that mean either or it could be either or both?
That's correct. It's
Okay.
intended that it could be either or both.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nacastro. Mr. Metters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, just for clarity, I've recused myself from the 1610 process, but I'm going to speak on the merits of just 193 Stone Hill. I've no issue at all with it being considered for affordable, attainable housing on its own or in any way, shape, or form. I do agree with my colleagues that we've kind of things that are snail's pace sometimes of getting some of the housing in this community, and we're trying to be way more aggressive. That being said, I do hope we make it a little bit of a broader, in general, not specifically in this article, that we don't lose sight of workforce housing, because that is a key element to our community, and I don't want to not send any mixed signals that that's not a concern of ours, but attainable for housing, affordable housing, and workforce housing collectively in our efforts through all the parcels that we're going to be looking for. So don't have any objection to it. I just have a mechanical question. If this were to go through for an affirmative, is there a timetable? What are the mechanics on what would happen to the 193 Stony Hill property in the interim of the construction of any new facility? We declare it surplus. Is that immediately determined as of the vote of the town meeting, or do we have to put a special date on it? Is there any language that we need to cover to get the intent we want, or at least the intent I believe is being put on the table?
Sure, thank you. So, again, it's not part of the article, but in the explanation, it does, at the end, talks about that this would happen once the new facility is complete and occupied. But in the meantime, we can work on, if there's feasibility studies or plans or anything along those lines that we need to do in the interim while the new facility is being constructed, that we have the opportunity to do those so that we can hit the ground running when the building is vacant.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. Yeah, I'm totally in favor. I think that should the 1610 be approved for the Center for Active Living, and this article would pass as well, I think it's a home run in terms of a win-win for both our seniors and our workforce, our worker bees, if you will, and folks that need affordable and attainable housing. I think Selectperson Davis brings up a great point about, and Mr. Shell, about kind of accelerating the time frames, if you will, to get something done. But I think this presents a tremendous opportunity to increase our inventory of a potential affordable and attainable housing, and I'm certainly very much in favor of it. So I think it's a good idea to get it out there at this town meeting. Mr. Shell.
Yeah, if I could just, the timing point is paramount, I agree. There is a cost-saving opportunity here. We can't put a number on it. We can't do anything really other than conceptualize it, but at least as a concept, it is real. You start with a building that's in existence, with a foundation that obviously subject to engineering reviews and so forth, but is in place. You're starting with a cost-saving opportunity that's also significant.
Yeah, good point. I think it's a repurposing with a real purpose. I think it's really, really cool. I think it's a great idea. Okay, Mr. Shell, a motion to place this on the annual town meeting warrant.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we place the article as presented and discussed on the town warrant for 2023 annual town meeting.
Second.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. A recommendation, please, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend the approval of the article just discussed and placed on the warrant for town meeting 2023.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Katie.
Mr. Chair, we need one
Yes.
more action.
We do,
We need the
okay.
board to declare the property surplus.
Right, through this motion, that would declare the property surplus to be placed on the warrant. So the board, so both actions need to happen, is the board would need to declare the property surplus, as well as town meeting would need to do that as well. So if,
Now, does that need to say that, though, in the? I'm sorry.
It's the first item in, under board action, maybe Mike might
I'm
offer
sorry.
that as a motion.
Sorry.
Yeah,
You did number two.
I
think.
missed my script.
One.
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
may I make a motion to, I move to change the purpose for which the real property located at 193 Stony Hill Road, Assessors Parcel 14H, 14A, F28A, containing approximately 39,496 plus or minus square feet, is held from its present use as a Council on Aging Center for Active Living to land held for the purpose of development, sale, or other disposition for affordable, attainable housing, provided that the change in purpose and disposition authorization approved hereby shall be subject to and contingent upon town meeting approval of the article for a new Council on Aging Center for Active Living facility project at 1610 Main Street, and adoption by the voters of the debt exclusion ballot questioned, authorized thereby, or take any other action with respect theretheto.
Thank you, Mr. Shell.
Second.
My bad. Thank you, Jill and Katie, for bringing that to our collective
Yes,
attention.
thank you.
Did you second, Ms. Davis? Okay. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Jill. Okay, the next item on our agenda, the water capital articles. And Alex, your name is here. Now we're starting to look at some money here. What do we got?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Yes, the next item on the agenda is for the water capital articles. And for FY 2024, there are two water capital articles. One for the replacement of water mains, $500,000. And the second article is $50,000 for the South Chatham Wells iron and manganese study. Both these articles are funded through what we know as water surplus, so funds from the water department, no impact to the tax rate. The first one, the water mains, this is sort of an annual appropriation that we've been doing for a number of years now to have money in the account as we're ripping up streets. We'd like to replace any of the old water mains that need replacing rather than ripping up streets twice. So I will pause for the water mains if you have any questions on that right now.
The only question I had, Alex, and for me, perhaps Dr. Bob, is Main Street done? Have we replaced the mains on Main Street?
I think there's still replacement needed between Library Lane and Chatham Bars Ave.
Okay. Okay. And you noted, and I thought it was an important point, that, we had a few water main breaks over the last year or so, so these funds seem to come in pretty darn handy during the course of the year.
Mr.
We
Chairman,
like to have,
Yeah. Yes, Mr.
I
DeCastro.
just have a question. Is the replacement piping, is it PVC piping? What is it? I assume it's replacing iron pipes or lead pipes. Do we know? It's
I think Dr. Bob might be the
Dr. Bob
expert
is
on
here.
this.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, most water mains nowadays are replaced with PVC piping. We have a mixture of old materials. We have steel. We have lead's usually only used on the service lines, but for the mains, most of the old ones were steel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Mr. Chairman, I
Go
move,
ahead, yep. Thank you, Mr. DeCastro.
I move we place the water capital water mains article in the amount of $500,000 on the warrant for the annual town meeting 2023.
Second.
Thank you. Vote, Mr. DeCastro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Chair says aye as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend to annual town meeting 2023 the water capital water mains article in the amount of $500,000.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. DeCastro.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Okay, water and manganese.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Iron
Again,
manganese,
this is a $50,000 request for study at the South Chatham wells, wells number 1 and 3, for an iron and manganese study to see, if it would be feasible, the most effective type of treatment at those locations. So again, this is trying to make sure that we have clean, potable water for the town of Chatham moving forward.
Just a quick question. This is for 1 and 3, Dr. Bob?
Yes.
1 and 3.
No, this would be 1, 2, and 3.
Okay,
Those
that
are
Sorry.
the 3 wells in the South Chatham well field.
it says 1 through 3, and okay, thank you. Yep. Any questions on the 50,000? Mr. Castro, please.
Yeah, thank you. This is to, I guess, Dr. Duncanson. So the memo says that recent testing was somewhat higher in terms of the levels of iron and manganese, both over the secondary maximum containment level. Is that a concern currently in terms of the potability of the water?
No, it's not a concern at this point regarding the potability of the water. Iron and manganese are both naturally occurring minerals from the bedrock that underlies our feet. They really only become an issue when the levels get significantly higher than they are here. Manganese being the problematic one that generally will cause diarrhea if the levels gets too high, but it has to be significantly above where it is now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move we place the Water Capital South Chatham Wells Iron and Manganese Study article in the amount of $50,000 on the warrant for annual town meeting 2023.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Chair says aye.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend to annual town meeting 2023 the Water Capital South Chatham Wells Iron and Manganese Study article in the amount of $50,000.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
The chair says aye as well. Thank you. The inflation protection article, Alex. This is a new little twist here. This is new.
Yes, thank you. This is a brand-new article, and this is being proposed at $100,000 for FY 2024. And the reason we're bringing this forward is that, as we all know, inflation has hit the country very hard over the last year. And we've noticed that in some of the budgets, and especially in the capital budget. This year, we have 2 items that were supplemental appropriations because departments weren't able to procure the goods or services or the equipment due to the rise in costs. So we figure if we have an inflation protection article, and we're starting with a modest $100,000, this will help if we have a capital item that if we appropriated money in the capital fund and the bids come in higher than we expected or than what we appropriated, we have a funding mechanism. So we don't have to put this off for a year, which then can result in, larger repair and maintenance costs or items not being, being deferred if we have something that, has to be deferred for a year. So we just thought it was a good fiscal planning to have this sort of as a reserve account. It's not to take the place if something doesn't get approved. That would not be what this article is for. And again, the town manager and the finance director's authorization would be required to access this account. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have on this. I know it's brand new, but again, we thought it was good fiscal planning.
Yeah, and I would agree, Alex. I think it is good fiscal planning because we had a couple occasions where we did run out of funds with vehicles, one. And I think as we go along, I think this is prudent. So I'm supportive. Mr. Metters?
The only question I have is there an expectation that this will be an annual article? And if so, will there be any cap to the kitty we're trying to build up?
I think we need to look to see how much it's utilized next year. So if it's not utilized, I don't foresee us replenishing it. If it is utilized, say $50,000 is utilized, we might ask to replenish that $50,000. Again, we don't have any experience. We know that we did have $45,000 in this year's capital, in the FY 2024 capital budget that was necessary due to increased costs. So we'll see what happens and we'll track it and we'll report back next year. If it's not utilized, I don't see us coming back asking for funds for it next year.
All right, good, thank you.
Any other questions for Alex on the inflation protection article, if you will? Hearing, seeing none, I'll entertain a vote, a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we place the inflation protection article for $100,000 on the annual town meeting warrant for 2023.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Metters. Mr. Metters, what say you?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend the inflation protection article for $100,000 to annual town meeting 2023.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Thank you very much. Okay. Other potential capital articles. As we discussed in our workshop, other than the ones that were listed, I don't believe we have any other ones that, other than the ones that are listed in our package. And so I'll go on to the consideration of, there's 5 major capital articles for our consideration this evening, including the treatment plan for wells 5 and 8, transfer station improvements, a belt filter press, Eldridge Public Library, HVAC, and a sand salt storage shed. Now, the capital that we have discussed prior to this moment is all included in the in our normal budget. It's included as 9% of our operating budget, and it's all entirely funded from free cash. And thus far, we have not changed the tax rate, if you will, for the town of Chatham. It's set, at least right now, before we delve into here, at $3.88. Now, Alex, I think it's important for us to understand the funding mechanisms for each one of these as we go forward, because it may factor into some of our thinking. So I'll take the first one first, I guess, the treatment plant for wells 5 and 8. This is a fairly important piece of business that we've got in front of us, and it's also one that's fairly high price. So Alex, or anybody else that wants to weigh in? Dr. Bob, I know you're on, so if you'd like to weigh in as well, thank you. Alex, I'll turf it to you, and then Dr. Bob, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this is quite a large request. The funding request for the water treatment plant for wells 5 and 8 is for $19,800,000, and that would be to construct the permanent water treatment plant to address the iron, manganese, and PFAS contaminants at these wells. So important to note on this is that this project is on the State Revolving Fund Loan Program intended use plan and has been approved, provided that there is local funding approved at the annual town meeting in 2023. So that means that borrowing is eligible at 2% loans right now, and there's a possibility with the PFAS contamination as part of this treatment plant, there might be additional lower interest rates through either the Clean Water Trust, but we are projecting right now the 2% interest rates, as water is always approved at 2% and not 0%. So currently, our financial advisors, if it was not approved for 2% through the Clean Water Trust, recommend a 4.5% interest rate for general obligation bonds. So 2%, would save us 2.5%, obviously, in interest rates. Water debt is paid through the water surplus, water revenue, or through the water rates. And right now, looking out, and we have that in your packet, water debt is dropping off in FY 2026, so that we think that we could program this new debt service to come in FY 2026 when the water debt does drop off. Looking out at 20 years of borrowing at 2%, it is quite a impact of $1.3 million for the first year of borrowing, but that is only $166, which would be not on the tax bill, but we can put that into the water rates, and we'll look at the water rates moving forward. We haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but again, this has been a priority of clean water for the town. So again, I think there's any technical questions, Dr. Bob might be able to answer those as far as the water, but quality, I'm just happy to answer any of the financial questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Alex. Questions for Alex? I just have a comment. The water fund seems to be inexhaustible as opposed to our water supply. It just does, and we haven't revisited water rates in how long now? Three or 4 years.
3 years.
And so, I think that's a project that we need to do going forward. Just as an editorial comment, and not even guardedly, but what choice do we have? I mean, not a whole lot of choice here. So I think if we want to preserve the sanctity of our water supply, let's just get this thing built at the lowest cost possible with the best possible result and not incur a whole bunch of interest. So anyway, my pithy statement. Mr. Nacastro, and then round the horn, if you might. It's a big number.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you point out, and as Alex points out, this would be funded by the water rates, so that debt service, that's principal and interest, right, Alex?
That's correct.
So, I mean, it's part of the aggressive plan to preserve and enlarge our water supply that we've been talking about over the past year. What's the latest status of the feasibility study for additional wells? I know that's not part of this, but is there, Jill, is there some money of, is it 50,000 or something that we have allocated for that or plan to?
Mr. Chair, I don't think that there was any funding appropriated for new wells. We had a feasibility study, and Dr. Bob was looking at that. I'm not sure if it's been 20 years or so. But Alex, do you have it in front of you just to confirm that we had not proposed any funding?
Yeah, we have not proposed any funding for new wells. We did have, and I'm not sure if that was in your packet from the 9th, a report by Whitman and somebody regarding the possibility of new wells. And I think the report, and Dr. Bob can answer this probably better than I can, really didn't identify abundance of water for the development of new wells. But I'll turn it over to Bob right now. I see he's here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there was the study a number of years ago by Whitman and Howard that looked at the entire town and identified potential future well sites. That is what led to wells 5 and 8. The second component of that led to wells 10 and 11 that we are currently bringing online. There were several other locations that were identified as potential well sources, but they were further down the list, if you will, because A, they weren't very high yielding sites, meaning they couldn't provide a lot of water at a particular time, or else they already had known issues with things like high iron and manganese and some potential other contaminants. So, you always go for the easiest ones first, 10 and 11, 5 and 8. And then PFAS came along, which wasn't an issue when that study was initially done. So, we've been talking about it recently with the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee. We've resurrected kind of that previous work that was done. In terms of a new study, honestly, I don't think we're going to find any other locations in Chatham where new wells could be sited. It may be worthwhile going back and revisiting some of the other sites. Most of them had test wells that were installed that could be resampled again to see how conditions have changed. But quite honestly, I think once we get 5 and 8 fully back online and we bring 10 and 11 back online, we will not have the problem that we had for the past couple of summers of a capacity issue. We had an issue the last couple of summers for reasons like PFAS and all, where we had to take wells offline. Now that we have the treatment plants going online, those wells will be back to their full capacity. And we may want to retake a look at the numbers in terms of what's our projected demand going forward versus what our capacity to meet that demand is. And I think one of the other things that has to factor into that conversation is increased conservation over the last number of years, and also taking a lot of irrigation systems off the town's water supply and transferring them over to private wells. So we may have sufficient capacity with what we currently have to meet our future demands, but we may want to just take another look at that and just confirm that before we embark on, retesting some of those previous sites that were further down the list.
Well, I do appreciate that. I think the Select Board did refer it to the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee, the question of looking
Right.
into adding new wells. You raise an interesting point about projecting demand going forward, if we're going to be building new housing in this town, if we're going to be rezoning West Chatham, for example, for increased density for housing, we're going to have more people in town, and we need to make sure that we have sufficient water capacity. So I know that the Water and Sewer Committee has referred to this matter, but they haven't really delved into it. I hope that that can be communicated to them to make this a priority item. I know they're working on a couple of other big projects, which we're going to hear about at some point very soon. So I just really wanted to make that comment. But I think this is something we have to do as far as wells 5 and 8. We did a manganese and an iron plant on Morton Road a few years ago. That seems to have worked out fine, and we just have to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Castro. Ms. Davis?
I totally agree with both your sentiments and Dean's, and I just wanted to reiterate that. But I really like the idea of looking at the projections. I think it's thoughtful, and more education around conservation and really the importance of water to our community should be expressed all the time. So I'm in favor of it.
Any other, Mr. Shell? Yep.
This is way before my time. It's my understanding that the Economic Development Committee several years ago did focus particularly on the possibility of taking irrigation systems off of town water and in one way or another incentivizing private wells. We're talking about trying to revitalize or re-engage with the EDC. This might be an initiative that we could have a look at, or they could have a look at, to help with this point.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Mr. Meadows?
No, very simple. Clean water is the anchor to so much what we want to try to do for this community. So we don't have a choice. And I think this is a no-brainer as far as supporting it. So I'm going to support it because we need to do it, frankly. It's just really that cut and dry.
Okay. All righty. Would someone like to make a motion and a placement, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we place the water treatment plant wells 5 and 8 article for $19,800,000 on the warrant for the annual town meeting 2023.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well.
Do we want a motion to recommend at this time, Joe?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
I move we recommend, Mr. Chairman, the water treatment plant article, wells 5 and 8, for $19,800,000 to annual town meeting 2023.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I think just one
Ms.
more
Jill.
as I look, a vote to place the debt exclusion
Yep.
ballot. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't need a debt exclusion ballot. For
This is from water rates.
This is from water rates, we're all set, yeah.
Magical water rates. Okay. Next item, but thank you. Anytime we, need a vote, please remind me, or, okay, transfer station improvements is next. We had a presentation, a month or so ago, or a workshop on the 9th. Alex, I'll turf it to you, and then back to the board for their input as well. Alex.
Okay, thank you. Yes, as you mentioned, you did have a presentation on the 9th regarding some of the transfer station improvements. And as I understand it, there are really two phases that we're discussing tonight, and that would be phase 1 and phase 2. And we have the cost estimates for both those phases. Phase 1 is the redevelopment of the residential drop-off area. The preliminary cost estimate is between 2.2 and 2.7 million. And then phase 2 is the new garage and the staff building, an estimated 2.1. And for tonight's discussion, I've sort of bundled those together as a $4.8 million project if you were to prioritize both phases at once, or if you want to move forward with just phase 1 or phase 2, we have those projections as well. Again, this would be a debt exclusion vote to be placed on the warrant and would have a direct impact to the tax rate once borrowing happens. So we've left the motion open as to the amount that you might want to recommend to town meeting. $4.8 million at 4.5% interest for a term of 15 years would be a 5-cent impact to the tax rate. And again, we have a lot of competing articles, so I'm trying to give you as much information as possible. And then if we had a 2.9 borrowing at 10 years at 4.5%, that's $430,000 in borrowing, principal and interest, 4 cents on the tax rate. And I think that was the two options available. Oh, phase 2, again, 15 years of borrowing at 2.1, 3 cents on the tax rate, or $304,000 principal and interest for the first year.
Okay, Alex, thank you. This is phased. We saw the presentation. What's the, take it all in one bite? You want to take it in 2 bites? You want to take it in no bites? I mean, I think we have to have a discussion. I'll give you my personal feeling is that the transfer station needs a lot of love and attention, both in how it's organized, how the traffic flows, and the where the employees work, and that building is sorely needed. If I had to give up one thing, I would do the building first and do the traffic routing second, but I'm open to other suggestions and other notions. Frankly, these improvements are long overdue, and I know Mr. Metters has been on this for a while, and I'm going to trip it to him first and then over to you, Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I mean, we have a lot of items on our plate to decide upon and how it's going to impact the town and the taxpayers and operations and everything lock, stock, and barrel. But for me, transfer station is kind of a long overdue project. COVID really derailed a couple of things, especially with the OSHA issues and the best environment for our staff. And at the pace, municipal projects can take, I'm actually more of an appetite of taking the bite off the Big Apple and taking both these projects on and get them queued up. They're clearly going to take some time to do, but I think it's a project that is long overdue, and it's definitely a location in town that many people venture to on a weekly or a daily, weekly basis, not daily basis. Lord help me here. So it's going to get plenty of eyes on it and plenty of trips, and it's used very well. So I'm inclined to support both phase 1 and 2 now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Metters. Mr. Nacastro had his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Mr. Metters bringing this forward over the years. To me, the determining factor is safety first. I think we have an obligation to be more respectful and considerate of both the staff who work at the transfer station and the townspeople and others who visit the transfer station. So I'm in favor of funding both phase 1 and phase 2 at the present time and deferring phase 3. But I did want to ask the question of Alex or Jill, are there any grant monies available from either the federal government or the state that could help defray some of the cost of this? And if we don't know of any right now, can we draft the article to allow for receipt of grant monies to counter the tax expenditure?
Yes, as always, we always include language to include any deferrals of borrowing, so grant monies would always be accepted. We will look for some grant monies. I know there's some small grant money, but any time that we look for borrowing, we always do look to offset any of the borrowing with any available grants.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nacastro. Ms. Davis.
I'm up in the air on this one as far as the phase 1 and phase 2 together. I definitely support the idea of a new garage. It's safety and the conditions of for our employees is really important. So I'm interested in hearing a little more about why people want to do both phase 1 and phase 2.
Okay, Mr. Shell.
I won't elaborate because I would just repeat what Shireen just said. I'm in the same place.
So I noticed that on the redeveloped residential drop-off area, there's quite a range of 2.2 to 2.7. It's a $500,000 range. Can we fine-tune that anymore? So even if we took a midpoint, that's a $500,000 delta. I mean, that's not even that's a fairly significant delta. So is it 2.2 or is it 2.7, or is it something in between?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think this was based on the presentation that was made at the February 9th meeting. So I took those numbers from that presentation, and that was, again, the design and engineering for phase 1 is at 85% complete, and for phase 2 is only at 50% complete. We do have some money remaining for that design and engineering. And also I want to point out that, if you decide to put forward the total amount for both phases, we don't have to go ahead with both phases right away. That just gives us the authorization to fund both phases, and then you can prioritize which ones you want to move forward with for construction. So we wouldn't be borrowing for both phases right away until contracts are signed for both phases. So if you wanted to move forward with phase 2, we could do that, although we would have the authorization for phase 1 and not need to go back to town meeting for that purpose.
Mr. Metters?
Well, to follow up on my colleague's question about, why both, I think we're all in agreement with that. The staffing environment is a priority. I mean, I don't think we disagree with that. The residential drop-off area, for those who have frequented the transfer station, not just efficiency, but frankly, safety. I mean, we've had vehicles move forward, bump the tables, which is where the bollards came from this past year, from a safety perspective. The larger collection containers where we put the mixed-use papers and newspapers, they're not ideal from a safety perspective, and especially in inclement weather to load. It's really not the most efficient system. It's what we have in place now, and I think just purely safety-wise, we can offer a better system. We don't have to do, the cream of the crop, but I think we can come up with a better, safer, more efficient setup to run the facility better. So, and safer.
Mr. Shell?
Yeah, I'm sold on the idea of doing both projects. The question really for me is whether we want to ask town meeting to fund or authorize funding for both of them, given that, as I understand Alex, and as I just understand what Mr. Metters was saying about the speed of municipal projects, do we need to have an authorization for funding for both before the town meeting in 2024? That's really where I'm coming from.
Further comment? Mr. Nacastro, then Ms. Davis.
I'd
Yep.
like to hear from Jill.
Yeah, okay, yep. Okay,
Thank you.
Jill, Jill and then Mr. Castro, yep.
Thank you. So our priority, as you've all articulated, is phase 2. That's the new garage and staff building. That's estimated at $2.1 million. It's only at 50% design, but it could be at a very strong schematic conceptual design for town meeting. Phase 1, and again, I don't want to sell the project short, there is some more work to do with the redeveloped residential drop-off area. Some of the traffic patterns, I think that could be worked out in the next month or so. So from what I'm trying to articulate myself is the entire project is really a priority, and the realities there are what would town meeting's appetite be for a borrowing. And so I think that if the board, I'd like to recommend the full amount to be a priority for the board as a whole, but if there has to be a trade-off, if it's, after you review all of the capital articles and we have to do some potential trade-offs, I definitely think that phase 2 garage building at approximately $2.1 million is the absolute priority.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yeah, I mean, I would just suggest, especially given what Jill just said, we send phase 1 and phase 2 to town meeting. It's always possible for someone to separate them out at town meeting at the floor and for town meeting to reject phase 1 and fund phase 2. And I would leave the decision up to town meeting as to whether they want to fund it all present time. But I understand the concerns expressed by Mike and Shereen.
Alex, just the delta, but the difference between a number on the tax rate, if you will, if you did 2.1 versus 4.8.
Well, if we were to borrow, the whole amount all at once, which is likely not going to happen, the tax impact for the first year for 15 years at 4.5% would be 5 cents on the tax rate. And for just the phase 2, it would be, I believe, 3 cents on the tax rate. Yep, 3 cents on the tax rate.
Okay. I know what I'm going to do. I'd like to move forward with the 4.8. I think that's what we recommend. It's a nickel on the tax rate. Okay. So, Mr. Meadows.
I move to place the transfer station improvement article for 4.8, is it?
Yes.
$4.8 million on the warrant.
And that's an authorization. It's not meaning, that doesn't mean we're going to spend. Okay. All right, Mr. Castro.
Did you get the second? I seconded it.
Yeah. Mr. Castro.
Aye.
Yep. Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
And Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Thank you.
And
then move to recommend?
Recommend approval?
And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
I mean, that way we have, if town meeting says they don't want to spend them, we at least have some flexibility. Hopefully we get the building done at least. That's my priority, should be our priority, I believe. Okay. Bill?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please. What, did I forget
We
something?
need to place a ballot question
Oh,
on
I'm
the
sorry,
annual
yeah.
town election warrant for this.
Thank you very much.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Jill. Belt filter press. This is one that, this is an expensive item. It also is one that I believe if we get it on the warrant, we get 0% financing for $5 million of it. Is that correct, Alex?
That is correct. So again, you've seen this belt filter press. It's been in the capital plan for a couple of years now. So the estimated cost is $5,800,000. And again, this project has received approval from the state revolving fund for 2023 at a 0% interest loan for up to $5 million of the estimated costs. So again, we might have additional funding or offsets through the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund. As you might recall, we've received money from them for outstanding debt, and anything that is approved under the Clean Water Trust or the SRF fund is eligible for those grants from the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund. So again, this would be Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion.
Yep.
And again, I did a conservative estimate of debt service for the 1.5% because not all of those, not all of the funding is eligible for the 0% loan. So I'm happy to answer any financial questions, and I think if you have any technical questions, Dr. Duncanson is here as well.
Just quickly, the 1.5%, you titrate that into 4 cents on the tax rate for the first year. Is that a correct statement?
Let me pull out my
Yeah.
numbers. Again, because it is a larger dollar, it is.
Yes. Now, Alex, on the Water Protection Fund, how much do we receive every year? Is that in the $600,000 range or the $500,000 range?
Right now, we are receiving $615,160 for our pre-existing wastewater debt. And then for future debt issuances, it comes off the amount that we need to borrow. So it's a direct reduction in the amount that we need to borrow and finance moving forward.
So, but that's 615. Have we earmarked, allocated, spent those monies, or can those monies be dedicated to the belt filter press?
No, that goes directly for the debt service, the pre-existing debt service.
Pre-existing debt service. Okay, thank
So it basically frees up $615,000 from debt service to be spent elsewhere.
Okay, then you answered the question in another manner, though. Could we free up $615,000 for the belt filter press? I'm just asking.
No, because I've already programmed that into the budget as an available source of funds to fund the debt service.
So if we were to recommend this and this were to pass, it would be 4 cents in the tax rate. And it's also my understanding that we cannot run this wastewater treatment plant without this puppy, number one. And the one we have there now would be used as the backup, number two. Excuse the metaphor. Anyway, I think it's almost, anyway, I think it's almost a no-brainer. We can't run the place without it. Mr. Nacastro.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex, how much of the cost is not fundable from the SRF loan?
800 grand.
So that would be 800,000. I could, yeah, I could run that number for 800,000 at, 4.5% would probably be a lot less than what I projected. I just, not sure what was, going to be approved as, again, if we do have ineligible costs, I thought 1.5% was a fairly conservative number.
Okay. So I understand that from what you just said in response to the questions from the chairman, that this is not eligible for payment out of the water protection fund, whatever it's called.
Yep.
But are we, that it's already been approved, it's 600,000 approximately a year. Isn't this eligible for application for new funding from that source? Dr. Duncanson can answer
yes.
that question.
Yes.
Thank you, Dean.
Yes, any project that gets approved by the SRF is then in turn eligible for funding from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. So this project would be eligible. This project basically has nothing to do with the existing 615,000 that we're getting, because that is for the old debt, or not the old debt, but pre-existing debt, as it's called. So this would be eligible for new funding from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund.
And we would make that application.
Yeah, we actually don't even have to make an application, if you will. Once you get approval from the SRF, and then it's funded through the Clean Water Trust, that automatically puts the projects in the queue for funding from the fund.
And the board would make a decision as to whether to fund this or part of it.
Well, the way it's working is we have funded any project that gets SRF funding. It really just depends, and right now projects have been funded at 25%. It really depends on whether or not the board has to change that percentage that the projects get. All the projects basically get the same percentage.
Okay.
So it's just a question of the board maybe having to change that percentage. There was an article recently that indicated that technically the fund may be out of money in 3 to 4 years, but we're working with the state to try to get an infusion into the fund of some of the federal ARPA money.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's encouraging. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dean, that was good. Ms. Davis.
We have to do this, as you said, and there's no out on this. And I think the idea that the Water Protection Fund is not, have a finite amount or infinite amount of money, and we don't know what's going to happen with future funding for it, I think we should take advantage now on this.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Any other further comment? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to place this belt filter press on the annual town meeting warrant.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to do this one. I vote to place the belt filter press article for $5,800,000 on the warrant.
Okay, Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. A recommendation.
Mr. Chair, I vote to recommend the belt filter press article for $5,800,000.
Thank you, Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And the chair says aye. So now we're up to 9 cents. Okay.
Valid question.
Oh, do we have to do a ballot?
We have to do a ballot. Yes, thank you.
So I vote to place this on the ballot.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Okay, built filter press. Who'd have thunk it? Okay, Eldridge Public Library HVAC. Here's another meaty article. Alex?
Okay, thank you. Yes, as you are probably aware, the Eldridge Public Library is a town-owned building and has had some heating and ventilation challenges this past year, and the HVAC system is actually beyond its useful life. So we had originally thought that this would be less than the $2 million that we were requesting, but when the contractors came out, they have recommended replacing the HVAC system, and the repair and replacement is a $2 million expenditure. So again, as noted in the report, delay of this replacement is not, fiscally prudent, as again, the cost to repairs has been increasing over the past year. So funding for this article is we're actually proposing to use free cash. We had put in a placeholder of $500,000 for the Eldridge Public Library HVAC system, as well as $500,000 for housing. But if we're not recommending moving forward with the $500,000 for housing, but to use that $1 million from free cash for the library HVAC system, and our available excess levy capacity, $1 million of the estimated $5.6 million excess levy to fund this project. So again, this would not be a borrowing authorization, but this would be available funds, but it would have an impact on the tax rate of an estimated of 10 cents for FY 2024.
Okay. Alex, I'm sorry, but could you just run down the funding again for this article, please, for my people?
Okay. The $2 million, we're estimating to use $1 million from free cash, and that would leave us a balance of just over $308,000 to carry forward for next year. And then $1 million from our excess levy capacity. So on the tax rate, which if we had the estimated tax rate of $3.88 cents, it would be $3.98 for FY 2024 based on our current valuation.
So we're up to 19 cents. Okay. I do have a quick question at the risk of being blasphemous here in this meeting and in my town, or our town, but the library does have a balance sheet, do they not? Don't they have a balance sheet? Don't they have a sizable balance?
Yes.
Yeah. Any discussion there by the leadership of chipping in?
I have not been involved with that, but again, because the town does own the building, the town usually does the repairs for items such as this.
Yeah, again, at the risk of being blasphemous, I just thought I'd ask the question. Mr. Castro.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, I'm the liaison
Yes, sir.
from this board to the trustees, and no, there has not been that sentiment expressed. But I think it should be pointed out that the town for decades has been neglectful of the condition of that building. It's not just the heating system that's been a problem. There have been a lot of other issues, and this board has heard about them, and town meeting has funded some of the improvements, including some ADA compliant improvements that are scheduled. It's something that has to be done. There is a companion organization called the Friends of the Eldridge Public Library, and we all know about it. They help fund a lot of the operational aspects, and including the purchase of various furnishings and technology for the library. So I don't think they look to being asked to fund this capital item. It's our building. We have to do the right thing by it. We haven't really seen, I'm sort of in a quandary in a sense, because it's a $2 million item. I don't think the $2 million is solely for the unit itself. Is that correct, Jill? Or I don't know if there's additional duct work. There's Terry.
Terry's
Sorry,
here.
I didn't realize you were here.
Terry, why don't you come up?
You explain what this is all about?
Thank you, Terry.
Sure. And again, Terry Whalen, Principal Projects and Operations. Yeah, so the proposal, as Select Board Member Nicastro indicated, we're pursuing one path, but essentially what we're looking at now is it's more than just the components, but it's coined as electrification. It's really a migration to a whole new system, but it would include also interior and exterior components, so air handling, basically the entire system. And just as we've been, I don't want to say moving along with various components, it's just gotten to a point where it really needs to be done as a complete comprehensive project. So we were moving down a path, and we did bring in Rick Pomeroy to help us out as well, and did some evaluation on some of the expenditures we were looking at. But really, the evaluation came back that we really need to do this comprehensively. And I think one component here that we haven't talked about is there's a greater potential for going down this path as well, for getting, I'll call it offset, because you do have to put the money up front, but through both the Green Communities and Cape Light Compact. And it could be on the order of, $500,000 is what we're anticipating, because the numbers are calculated based on the tonnage of the conversion. So it's a more, better return on this type of project than some of the smaller components that we were attacking. But again, it wasn't really getting the whole, at the whole problem and the continued, I'll say increasing costs with not much return on the performance of the system.
So what you're suggesting is that we could potentially get up to $500,000 from Cape Light Compact or other sources to help
Green
defray
Communities,
this?
yeah, so
or
that-
under some of the new federal legislation, perhaps?
And there might even be, I don't want to get too, but
Right.
I talked with Margaret at Cape Light Compact, and the engineer on the tonnage, and we just had, that as a base number. But there could be other programs as well. I still haven't seen, we are hearing about them, but not really seeing the actual, the programs. But I think it's the Inflation Reduction Act is the one that is really supposed to have a lot of opportunity for facilities, I believe, in it. But I still, and I think, as was stated before by either the town manager or Alex, we would continue to look at all the opportunities to get any additional grants for, efficiency that we can get our hands on to write down, I guess,
And
the overall expenditure.
we're talking about a state-of-the-art, high-efficiency unit. It's probably more advanced than we have at the fire station. It's some type of a fancy heat pump, I think. I don't want to use the word fancy, I shouldn't.
Well,
but-
again, but
any more than I want to call that the Inflation Reduction Act.
yeah, no,
But and I do want to say, because I did talk about the historical treatment of the library building, or attention to the library building, that Jill and Terry have, and over the past several years, since I've been on this board, we've made a lot of efforts to correct problems at the library, whether it's air conditioning or windows, which is another issue going on right now. So we're making some progress, and we're trying to, deal with the fact that we've got a very old building. It's historical. It's a treasure to the town, and I think we have to support this. And as I recall, Jill, you told me that the town of Carver has the same type of unit.
yeah, that's where the estimate really comes from, and it's, as real time. So Rick Pomeroy has been working on a project, almost essentially the same exact square footage. We're actually a touch smaller. I think they were 19,000 square feet. Our our conditioned area, I think, is around 17.5. So that's, based on real numbers in the marketplace, is where the dollar value comes from that we're requesting.
Okay,
to
so
fund the project.
I'm assuming that the article will be drafted in such a way to allow for any grant monies. So I'm going to support this, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely, Mr. DeCastro, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm not a staunch supporter of the Eldridge Public Library and have been for these many decades. It's an incredible town asset, and it's a wonderful building. I was going to ask about the windows, because I know we've supported replacing all the windows, I don't know how many times, and I think we did roofs there, et cetera, and landscaping and repurposing, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I am going to be very supportive, and I am extremely supportive of the Eldridge Public Library. Love the place. The fact that it's an old building and then we're applying new heating technology and electrification, I'm sure is a challenge, and I'm sure it's very expensive. I do scratch my head a bit over $2 million, but okay, that's what it is, that's what it is. Mr. Metters?
Well, would it be safe to say that the $2 million might have a little bit of a structural element to it? Only because the existing system, let's say, is not ideally located and where some of the mechanics are and some of the functionalities of it, that this system is going to address a lot of the issues that are currently there.
Yeah, so there are some other components and elements and things that are involved with also, changing ducts and things to interface with the newer systems. So those types of things, structural, and when we say structural, minor, location of some of the key, particularly the air handling equipment. So also, in addition to the engine, if you will, the heat pump, you also have the movement of the air. So the fans, blowers, air handlers, those types of things might need to be located in different locations. So again, there's some additional, potentially architectural work and a couple of other disciplines in there as well. So it's not just a straightforward, in-kind replacement. And again, with, ductwork and air handling involved too. So there's additional engineering. It's beyond. It's not like an HVAC vendor type of replacement. It's an engineered replacement to make sure also that that we also have all the air quality improvements as well going forward.
Okay, so we have potential grant funds and maybe a fundraising initiative by the Friends, and hopefully we can defray some of these costs here. Okay, Mr. Nacastro, do you have a motion to place?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we place the Eldridge Public Library HVAC article for $2 million on the warrant for annual town meeting 2023.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. A recommendation, Mr. Nacastro.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend the Eldridge Public Library HVAC article for $2 million to annual town meeting 2023.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Thank you very much. We're up to 19 cents. Okay, the last but not least, the sand salt storage shed, S cubed. Okay, Alex, take it away.
Okay. Yes, thank you. The sand salt storage shed at the DPW, behind the DPW building, is in need of replacement. And I believe that you, again, heard a presentation on this back on the 9th. And there were two alternatives for replacement of the shed at the DPW. And alternative one is the high arch gambrel design with an estimated cost of just under $1,820,000. And the other alternative is the fabric structure with an estimated cost of $1,293,000. So again, we would need a capital article to approve debt issuance to fund this because there's no remaining money in Chapter 90 funds, which we get from the state on the order of about $337,000 a year. We do have excess levy capacity. However, again, we propose that for the Eldridge Public Library, and to reduce the costs, mitigate any increase to the tax rate, we're requesting that this be a debt issuance as well.
Okay, thoughts on the salt shed, please. Mr. Metters.
I say we just place this before the voters and let them weigh in on it. It is a project that needs to be done. Regrettably, my personal opinion, based on the two alternatives, I'm not overly impressed by fabric structure alternative 2. I don't know if that would be the best for our wonderful environment down here. So I know there's replacement costs of the fabric over time, but I don't think that's going to be a project we want to tackle. So the only option for me is the high arc gambrel design, which is $1.819 million. But if we're going to queue this up, I would offer that design. I would stay away from the fabric structure.
I think you probably have a resounding consensus on that point, Mr. Metters. The cost strikes me, I'm not sure I know why this shed building would cost that much, but I think it's because of remediation. Correct me if I'm wrong. Someone correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, when the consultant had provided the report, the estimated out-of-state soil disposal cost was more than $185 a ton, so it could be as much as $362,000 for the disposal cost for the soil.
But
Mr. Shell, Mr. Nacastro, then Mr. Shell, and then anyone.
no, please.
No, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I agree that if we're going to do this, it should be the Gambrell building. I also have the same concerns as to why this is so expensive, but I understand the earth removal and all of that. But I wonder if this could be deferred for another year. I mean, this is a lot we're putting in front of town meeting with all these other projects. And I guess that would be my preference. If the sentiment of the majority of the board is to put it forward, I guess I could go along with that, but I don't think this is as urgent as the others.
I would agree with you, Mr. Nacastro. Mr. Shell.
Yeah, that is my sentiment, although it was more framed as a question. I'm glad to see that perhaps there's other sentiment on the board for that. I appreciate, actually, I recall it was more than $365,000, but still, you're looking at $1.4 million to $1.5 million for a building that is basically a shed. And that's a lot of money for that. I just, I don't fully understand that either, but I would be happier if we could defer this.
Okay. Ms. Davis, comment?
I agree.
I'm pushing it off a year and keeping it on the queue to review. Doesn't bother me.
It has been hanging around, and I saw the pictures, and it's not pretty. However, hopefully we can wring another year out of the salt shed.
Don't think it would be any worse than that fabric.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Okay, so we're not going to do anything with salt shed. Okay. We now, next item on our agenda this evening is an executive session, and I will turf this one to Mr. Nacastro to take care of the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board go into that the select board go into executive session under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Number 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, taking, lease, or value of real property, parenthesis, 251 Coral Road, close parenthesis, if such discussion may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the governmental body, with no return to open session.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Okay, we'll go around and take a voice vote here. Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Dyken says aye. Thank you very much. Good night, Chatham.